Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Can everybody hear me? I can see a couple of messages now. So I want to make sure everybody can hear me before I begin. Okay, wonderful. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Allahumma faqihna fi ad-din wa alimna ta'wil wa alhimna rushdana ya Rabbil Alameen. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Alhamdulillah. So welcome one and all to this live session titled Building a Hanafi Library. Normally when I've done other sessions, I've used Zoom, and I guess that gives an opportunity to share certain things like presentations and the like, but I haven't quite figured everything out on this platform, so this is a bit of an experiment really. So inshallah we'll see how everything goes. I'm assuming that that everybody can hear me clearly and the like, but if you have any problems, do let me know. Inshallah the chat box is then available, and inshallah you can make use of it. I do really want this. I'm not really doing a presentation of sorts in that formal sense, but inshallah having a bit of a discussion with you all on this topic, and hopefully there can be engagement on your part as well, and I'll take your questions and the like. Of course, this is a specific session, so it's not a general Q&A. So I'm not don't intend to kind of sit here and answer people's general fiqh questions. So please do try to stay on topic and the like. Of course, there are other times and places for those types of conversations, for Q&A, and also other learning opportunities with respect to learning about the madhab and so on and so forth, which you can find elsewhere. So right now, I just want to focus on this idea of how to build a library, which is really just somewhat of a specific addendum to a post which I had shared recently, which as a result of which I received questions and the like about books, what books to buy, and so on and so forth. So I thought this could be an opportunity to discuss in person with you all, with those interested, some of these types of things, and inshallah we can benefit from being in each other's company. بإذن الله تعالى. So like I said, as I'm talking, you don't necessarily have to wait till the end as such to ask your questions, because I'd like to kind of keep it dynamic and fluid, and also somebody might ask a question which reminds me of something, and then we can also go and cover various directions. But let's see how everything goes, and if nobody has any questions or any points that they'd like to ask, then we can call it a day after that, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So just a couple of general points first. The first thing to note is that the book is an essential component in this entire ta'allum or talab al-ilm process, that you must necessarily have books in order to attain unto ilm, even though the book itself isn't the bearer of ilm. Rather, you receive the ilm from the shaykh. So this is why the ulama say, al-ilmu fi as-sudur wa laysa fi as-sudur. That ilm, that knowledge is in the hearts, and it is not in the lines of the pages of books. So although it's an important part, it's part of the arkan of ta'allum, that you do need kitab sahih, that's part of it. You also need a manhaj, which is sahih, and you also need a shaykh that is sahih. So these are all part of the process if you want to attain unto talab al-ilm. But you have to recognize that you don't attain unto ilm as a result of the book, but you attain unto ilm as a result of the majlis, or as a result of the shaykh, i.e. that the essential component in talaqi, in receiving ilm, is to be present with the alim, is to be present with the shaykh, is to sit in this majlis and to replicate the sunnah of ta'allum, which returns all the way back to the Sahaba, even Sayyidina Jibreel, when he sat with the Prophet والسلام, and all of you are well aware of the famous riwayah of the hadith of Sayyidina Jibreel. So this is always this should always be the heart, at the heart and in the back of a person's mind, or even at the front of a person's mind, when they are thinking about books and the like. Of course, I'm not going to go through all of the tafsir with respect to purchase the general fiqh that I had in that post. There's not a sharh of that post which I did. So if you're interested, you can go back. We can talk about that separately. But it's more just about the building. But before, this is just a prelude before we get into the details of what building actually ends up looking like. The second thing to note is that what counts is not the amount, right? So it's not the amounts, it's not how many books you have, but it's about the nature of what you have. So this is something that I'll be expanding upon later as well. Of course, there's a time and place for certain texts. Not every single individual needs every single type of text. The talib al-ilm doesn't need every text at every stage of his journey, but there will be points at which he needs a larger library, and building a library is part of talib al-ilm. But as you're going through the process, you have to go through it with fiqh. And if you focus on the ma'ani which are found and bequeathed in texts which are written by those great ulama of the tradition, books which have the study of those books have produced great ulama, the great ulama of the tradition manifested in the world as a result of the study of these texts, then you can be sure that these are the kinds of texts which you would want to have access to and also study, so that you can attain unto the kind of knowledge which they attained unto. Knowing how to go through this process and knowing how to learn is potentially more important than the learning process itself. Because if you simply learn, but you learn the wrong thing, then you can end up in not a very sound place. But if you know how to learn soundly, you know how to learn properly, then inshallah the hope is that you will, if you're following a sound manhaj and you're completing the other arkan, then you will be able to follow the correct path. Because remember, in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, the person who is mentioned is the person man salaka tariqan, right? The salaka tariqan. This tariq is a tariq which is masluk, which is incidentally, it's a path which has been traversed, a path which has been followed by those who came before us, which is incidentally also the definition used by the Hanafis to describe the sunnah. If you're on the sunnah, you are on the path of light. You are on right guidance. And if you're not, and you're somewhere else, then you're just missing the mark. Right? You're missing the mark. And that's why you have books like the Ta'lim al-Muta'allim, which express tariq al-Ta'allum, that the instruction of the student with respect to the pathway, right, of learning, that how to properly learn. And this is why knowing how to learn is always muqaddam, should always be prior to actual learning. Should always study talab al-ilm first. And similarly, before buying books, you should learn what exactly you need to study, and then what should you buy, what should you purchase, and how should you build your library. Because otherwise you end up with a nonsensical collection of books which aren't really representative of the kind of books which will help you attain unto great learning. Because this is what the talib al-ilm, this is what he is seeking. He is seeking ilm. So he has to go through a process whereby he arrives at ilm. But you have to do so without shahwa. You have to do so without shahwa. It's why some of the ulama will say that reading one book twice or multiple times, right, but I'll just suffice with twice for now, is superior to reading two books. And now many people would be put off by completing a book and then having to go back to the beginning and reading it again. But the ulama, again, they have already explained that the sign of a talib al-ilm is sidq, is genuineness, is his sincerity, his ikhlas. And if his himma is lessened even slightly by reading the masala a second time, then the ulama said that such a person is not even a sadiq. He's not even a sadiq with respect to ilm. Why? Because it's not about this book or that book, but it's about the masail of ilm. And the masail of ilm are coming from the mishkat al-nubuwah. Right? So all of this is coming from the lamp of the Prophet ﷺ, so to speak. Everything is coming from the Prophet ﷺ. These are all the bahr of the anwar of the Prophet ﷺ. This is a tariq which you learn. So it's not about the masala itself, but it's about what the masala is representative of. So if you learn the masala from Quduri or you learn it from the Kanz, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Of course, there's other tafasil as well. The ulama are doing different things. They're adding different quyud. It's representative of more development within the subject area and the like. Of course, I'm not negating the fact that there are many fawaid to reading different books as well, but it's more about the process of ta'allum that I'm talking about here. That sometimes, if you look at some of the authors, even a late author like Abdul Ghani al-Maydani, صاحب اللباب في شرح الكتاب, he read the book أي قدوري multiple times, he said, until it lifted its veils. Right, so it lifted its veils. And if you read the ulama, there's so many of them who use language like this. And that's why some of the ulama have written, I'm not sure of what the source is, but the kitab لا يعطيك سره excuse me. That a book won't give you its secret, of course, because books have asrar. The author is trying to express ma'ani to you, except the difference is, like we said at the beginning, that the miftah of the asrar is the shaykh. But the point is that once you've opened that door, then you can attain unto those asrar, because they are mawdu'a fi hadhihi al-kutub, because these are ma'ani raqiya. These are high, deep, prophetic ma'ani. This is wahi itself, which has been summarized and explained and ordered and interpreted by the ulama and transmitted so that the tulab al-ilm can receive it, become recipients of it, internalize it, and then become the bearers and the inheritors of that tradition. So undoubtedly, the kitab is an extremely important part in that entire conversation. But once you read the entire book, reading it a second time and a third time, you begin to experience more and more futuhat, more and more openings. The asrar of the book become clearer and clearer to you. The maqasid of the ta'lif become clearer. If you think about anybody who's written any book or analysis of any book, they've probably read the book a good few times before they started talking about the various trends in the book and the kind of language he uses and how it connects to language used by other authors and so on and so forth, and why they're able to tell you where things manifest in the book. For example, the masala is towards the end of the book, or he put it in this chapter or that chapter, and so on and so forth. So these are part, you begin to appreciate the reason for why some of these types of things happened. If you don't necessarily, sometimes you won't get everything the first time. This is not how ilm works. And that's why the ulama said things like this in the adab of the talib al-ilm, that you read masala, if you don't have the same masala the second time, the third time, the 1,000th time, then you're lacking in sidq, you're lacking in ikhlas, you're lacking in something, and you need to work on that thing, because you're not giving everything of yourself to ilm. The point is that these masail are all representative of basically the same ma'ani as emanating in this, we're talking about it from a Hanafi perspective, from Imam Abu Hanifa. And he is summarizing the ulum which he has inherited from the Salaf who have come before him. He's like the door to which opens up onto the ilm of the Salaf. So he summarized everything that's been transmitted down. So that's why these ibarat, they summarize tremendous ilm, and you only attain unto that ilm by really spending time with the books, with the ulama, with the masail. So that's why sometimes reading the book a second time is actually far superior to reading Why? Because that gives you an opportunity for tathabbut. Mastering one book, right, is far superior than reading 10 books without mastering any of them. You just become jack of all trades, jack of all books. So mastering one book is far superior. If you simply took one book like the Mukhtasar of Imam Quduri and you read it until you can read it backwards and you know everything and what it says and what it means and the asrar and the ma'ani of it, you'd be a faqih in the Hanafi school. Even if that's the only thing. And if you look at the madhab in terms of how it expanded out with the later authorities and the like, and the kind of texts which came later, even just the Imam Markhinani's Hidayah, then you can see the importance of Quduri shines through, because all the Masail of Quduri are right there. Well, the vast majority of them are right there in the Hidayah, and then all of the commentaries on the Hidayah and the like. So the ruh of the Hidayah is actually Quduri. And similarly with other books, of course, Quduri is not the beginning of the equation or the discussion, but he's partway through the story has already been developed up until the point of Imam Quduri, and then of course Quduri is a significant figure with respect to those who came after him. And similarly, in the development of some of the other sciences like Abu al-Mu'in al-Nasafi and his significance with his Tabsirat al-Adilla and his Tamheed and his other works which he wrote, the Bahr al-Kalam and the like, and how that became basically a turning point with respect to how the trajectory of the Maturidi tradition looked like thereafter. So there's always significant points and significant figures, but the focus right now is upon the masail, that you have to go beyond the zahir of the ibara, as it were, and get to the ma'ani of those ibarat. And once you arrive there, then the expression across the text is basically the same thing, of course, with the exception of the secondary masail and the quyud and the later developments. And of course, that's all an aside. I'm just talking about the qalb of the ilm. I'm talking about the ruh of the ilm right now. So with respect to the ruh or the arwah across sciences, then the mastery of these, even just a single text, will give you a tremendous amount of knowledge. But like I said, there has to be a reading through the sanctity, through this sacred connection, right, of the talib with the shaykh, right, the talib, the tilmid with the ustadh. That this is the integral part of the transmission of knowledge, that this is how you receive it, because it's not about those factoids, it's not about the gathering of factoids, but it's about everything that comes with it, everything that you learn from the shaykh, all of that nur that you receive, because the mas'ala comes wrapped in all of the anwar, it comes wrapped in the hal of the shaykh. So you receive all of the ahwal with the mas'ala. So then it's about internalizing all of that, the adab which you pick up, the husnul khuluq and the akhlaq which manifest, the tadarru' ila Allah ta'ala, the beseeching of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the du'as and the like, the kind of attitude that you're supposed to have with respect to ilm, and so on and so forth. All of these things, the way that he, for example, functions and prays and greets other people and greets children, all of these types of things, they are part of what you receive as a talib al-ilm, which you don't necessarily get if you are simply watching a recording of something, for example, or which is still not ideal, but it's better than nothing, is that you have like an online class, which again means that you only have that 1 hour slot or that 2 hour slot, and you don't have anything more than that, because there's always something which happens at the beginning. There's engagement, the way that people are, the way that people behave in person, and so on and so forth. All of these things are part of this learning process. So learning about how to be a talib al-ilm is extremely important. It's the first thing that should be done before doing anything else. And then once you've done that and you start the process of learning, and whilst fulfilling all of the adab and everything, then that's when you begin to explore the importance of the book. And if you go at the book and the like without the guiding hand and the key of which is in the hands of the sheikh, then what happens? Then you become susceptible to learning mistakes, just like somebody. And we see it, like you just have to try it, and I'm sure people have experienced this, but somebody who's memorizing the Quran, but they don't have a sheikh, what happens? You pick up all kinds of mistakes. There's all kinds of mistakes which you don't necessarily realize until you go and sit at the, before a sheikh, qari, a reciter of the Quran. You recite, and then he picks up all these mistakes that you didn't even realize. So it's the same thing, especially when of course, books are being published all the time, but we still have significant problems with respect to publications, and they're sometimes making the halal haram and making the haram halal. You miss a la, lam alif, la yajuz becomes yajuz. Extremely different. This is warp your entire worldview, entire fiqh, your entire aqida, your entire tasawwuf, your akhlaq. Everything about the deen is going to be completely warped if you try to go at it yourself. So what happens? You become filled with errors, filled with mistakes, and you actually have no authority in ilm. That's not how it works. You must necessarily study, but that doesn't mean you must necessarily study every single book with a sheikh, because once you have the mafatih of ilm, because what do you study? That's why you don't study 27 books with your sheikh. You study 3, 4, 5 books, and that's it. You learn the fiqh of ilm. You learn the key masail of ilm. Once you do that, that's when you are free now, so to speak, to kind of engage with the entire tradition, and whilst recognizing that you have that there's a roof, like the sheikh, as it were, is going to keep you in check, and you also have your peers and other people around who will correct you if they have nasiha towards you. If you do fall off the edge, so to speak, if you don't go outside that circle of security, so to speak. And this is why it's important not to simply be alone. Like you're not a loner in talab al-ilm. There's no such thing. You cannot simply learn ilm alone. That's not how it works. And this is why Imam Shafi'i radiyallahu ta'ala anhu said, al-ilmu rahimun bayna ahlihi. The minute you enter into that, you've entered into a family now. The sheikh is like ab ruhi. He's like a spiritual father to you now. You have other people who are around. Your peers are now your spiritual brethren. Your brethren fil ilm. Al-ikhwa fil ilm. And all of these, and this is why all of the ulama who came before you now, these are all your aba fil ilm. That's why Abu Hanifa would say that he would pray for his companions, he would pray for his mashayikh before his parents, because they have safeguarded his akhirah. Right? Whereas the parents look out for your dunya primarily. And Abu Yusuf said the same thing. And he said, and I do the same for Abu Hanifa, that I pray for Abu Hanifa before my family. Of course, it just means that they make, he makes dua for Abu Hanifa just as he makes dua for his parents. It doesn't mean that my first loyalty is to my sheikh before my parents. That's not what it means, because some of these types of ideas can also unfortunately get abused in our times, but that's a conversation for another time. I'm not really talking about that right now. So these are some general things to keep in mind with respect to talab al-ilm, seeking ilm, the importance of that circle and that majlis and that connection that you have to the ulama, the fact that you are entering into this maidan with other people, and then you press ahead with other people. Of course, that doesn't mean that you are unable to come to conclusions if they're based on ilm, because sometimes when people are not functioning on the basis of ilm, then they might simply appeal to certain things. So making appeals are sometimes logical fallacies. So you can't simply make appeal to this and appeal to that and so on and so forth, because there's no emotion in ilm. Ilm is an emotionless endeavor. Rather, everything has to be on the table so we can consider all of the masail without our emotions getting in the way. And that's why some of the ulama, they also express this in the context of taqwa or wara'. For example, that there's no wara' fil ilm. That's not how it works. Of course, there's elements of this, but I just mean in a general way that the ulama have expressed some of these types of ma'ani, which are important ma'ani with respect to a talib al-ilm who is going from one place to another place. Because really building the library is going to go side by side with this progression of the talib al-ilm. So it depends on where you are in your talab. That's going to dictate the kind of library which you're going to have. And then as you progress, then the nature of your aspirations with respect to your library is now going to change. So you have to consider, like somebody who is at the beginning of their talab and they're seeking the library of the kummal, of the perfected ones, or those at the ends of their journey, or those 20-30 years ahead of you, then this is only shahwa. It's only from shahwatul khafiyya. That what you should do is that one book that you have, right? That one book, just learn that. Just learn that one book. You don't need 100 books, and this is just shahwa. Right? So this is the issue that we also need to keep in mind as well. That, like I said, as you progress through ilm, necessarily you will increase in a strategic way, because this is the fakhr of the alim, that it's fi kutubihi, just like the fakhr of the tajir is fi kisihi. They say the fakhr of the trader is in, like Shaykh Abdul Fatah Ghudda, rahimahullah ta'ala, his pride is in his pocket, as it were, in his merchandise and in his money and that type of thing. Whereas for the alim, it's in his fi kutubihi, right? So this is the thing. But it's, of course, it's not a thing that to show off. There's no your books are not going to help you in the akhirah. The books are not going to help you in the akhirah. Now, what's going to help you is the ilm which you received and the ilm which you practiced in your life, with ikhlas, in following the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and the ilm which you left in the world through your abna and through your children and the banat and your boys and girls and everybody that you left, and in your writings and the like, and all the sadaqat. This will be of benefit. But in reality, that's why a true faqih, he doesn't suffice with the ilm alone. That's why it's in the definitions of what it means for somebody to be a faqih, as Imam Sarakhsi and others have mentioned in the usul, that it manifests through tatbiq of the sharia, that it's practicing the sharia in your life, that it's living the reality of all of this. And when you live that and you fulfill the dictates of knowledge, which is upholding it with ihsan in accordance with the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, this is when you attain unto eternal felicity. And this is the maqsid. Your books aren't coming with you. They won't help. So the books are only a wasila. So that's how you have to consider them. They are a tool. They are a great tool, a tremendous tool. The ulama have also said that buying books is from sadaqah, because for talib al-ilm, when he does that and he spends lillahi ta'ala, then really then what he gains from that, others benefit. Right? So others benefit from, like, whether it's his children or it's his colleagues or his students or anybody else, any of those random people all over the internet and the like. So people will benefit from that. So this is why it becomes a means of sadaqah. In fact, some of the ulama actually said ihda'ul kutub. This is another thing, another fa'idah when it comes to books. Ihda'ul kutub yurithul ghina. So even gifting books, why? Because it's another means of sadaqah, because it's ilm, and then gifting them to others is a means of sadaqah, and sadaqat, the ma'ani and the benefits and the fawaid of sadaqat always return to the musaddiq, the person who is actually giving lillahi ta'ala. And anything you give lillahi ta'ala, because the purchasing books should be with niyat salihah. The point is, again, not to fulfill that I have the book and so doesn't have the book. That's not the point. Rather, there should be a maqsid salih, and this is why you should build your library with fiqh. so that you end up with a meaningful library, and a library which is built, which you benefit from, because there's no point in having a bunch of books that you never ever read, that you never see, you never benefit from them. And then this is almost like it's a hujjah against you in this case. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for protection from these types of things. But just like everything else in life, just like tarbiyah, just like ta'aleem, just like the practice of faith, just like learning, there is a fiqh. There is a fiqh to building a library, that you have to do it strategically, and you have to recognize that the kind of purchasing that you do, you have to ensure that it is meaningful. And everything that you give, as I was mentioning before, anything that you give lillahi ta'ala, it will always come back to you. You'll always benefit from it. Anything you spend lillahi ta'ala, it's from sadaqat, even the buying books or anything else, then you'll always find that the fawaid of that return back to you. If in salahat an-niyat. So if the niyat, the niyah, the person's intention is sound. Okay. So those are some introductory comments. So I'll start talking a little bit more now about specific books and the like. I can see there's already a couple of questions. Inshallah, I'll take some of those in due course. Anybody else who has a question, you're welcome to kind of post it. You're welcome to post comments as well to tell me that you're still awake and alive and with me, although it feels pretty much like I'm just talking to myself over here. So inshallah, feel free to do so. So now getting on to the specifics. So I'll talk just generally now about the different components of a Hanafi library, and then I'll try to bring it in to the process of doing that. Or it might be a kind of a mixture of both. As I said, it's not like I have a formal presentation here, but it's somewhat a discussion of sorts to kind of get through to some natija, some conclusion, and inshallah some benefits from all of this. Alhamdulillah, good. I can see a bunch of messages now. Great. I'm happy that people are alive and kicking. Alhamdulillah. Okay. So the reason why I was quite specific now about building a Hanafi library is because this was addressed to Hanafi Tulab al-Ilm, so students of knowledge who are Hanafis. And the reason for this is because sometimes popular curricula, popular readings and writings aren't necessarily presenting a Hanafi perspective, one focusing in on the Hanafi method or the Hanafi way, or what the Hanafis have said about something, but they are part and parcel of society, so to speak. So people read them and study them and transmit them and write in a certain way and function in a certain way. And sometimes it's just a case of people not necessarily being in tune with what is actually available and and having direction, because again, like I mentioned, it goes back to fiqh, that it's not simply a case of just doing what you want. If you're just doing what you want, you're doing ilm alone, you won't succeed. You must necessarily have a companion. You must necessarily have other people. You must necessarily have a shaykh. If you don't, you have to find something. You have to find a majlis. If you're serious about your talib al-ilm, it's one thing to be a casual baraka, a talib al-ilm who's just a baraka surfer. Just go, just benefit from everything, just go everywhere, just do it. Nobody's really, not really a shaykh, but everybody's my shaykh and everybody's my companion. And this is a muhib of ilm. This is somebody who loves knowledge, right? So, but he's not a true talib al-ilm, because a true talib al-ilm they have to set themselves up for something. They have to do something. They have to settle themselves. This is why the ulama talked about the idea of tathabbut. If you kind of settle yourself somewhere, you have to strategically do something and transition from one stage to another, to a third stage, and so on. So there are different ulum, and there are some ulum which are more central, And there are some ulum more important, directly important to the, for example, to the Hanafi talib al-ilm, because that's the primary, that's who I am primarily addressing, and some which are more generic. So some of the ulum al-ala, for example, they are generic. So in the sense that there isn't like a Hanafi Nahu, unless you want to say the Kufan school of Nahu is Hanafi Nahu. But the point being that these are just of course they're necessarily madaris and everything. But the point being that you just learn Nahu as it is. You learn sarf, you learn wada', you learn linguistic theory and etymology and all of these types of things. Similarly, balagha, rhetoric, and logic, and adab al-bahthi wal-munadhara, dialectics, and all of these types of things. But these are just generic tools. These are the tools of ilm. This is why they are called the ulum al-ala. They're an ala because they are ala lil-ilm. So you can actually do something with the knowledge. Because if you don't study these sciences, then you can't actually access the ulum of the awwaleen, so to speak. So that's why somebody who's serious about their talab al-ilm and most serious curricula, they will direct people to the ulum al-ala first, right? If you're on that trajectory of learning in a more serious manner. So that's not the object of our discussion. So the ulum al-ala are just generic sciences and the like, even though there are specific masail which are more discussed in greater depth in specific areas. For example, like usul al-fiqh. So there's an in-depth discussion, in fact more so than what the Ahlul Lugha, the people and the scholars of the Lugha discussed on, for example, the huruf al-ma'ani. In fact, it's something that the Hanafis were kind of quite known for, the fact that they have this extremely detailed analysis of the huruf over there in usul fiqh. Similarly, the nature of sometimes the ulama talking about certain, so it's important to, this is why you also study, I mentioned it earlier today in a class, but the mabadi al-ashara, this is why these foundational investigations are so important, so you can recognize what's happening in a science, because sometimes terms are used, I don't want to say borrowed, but it's the same term. So for example, the mashhur according to the Hanafi is different to the mashhur according to the ulama of musalah al-hadith, and also the nature of the majaz is different to majaz or its varying types in balagha. So balagha and usul, there's differences there. Hadith, musalahat al-hadith, and usul al-fiqh. So usul is quite a key science, and that's why sometimes they also refer to it as the ulum al-ala. But I'm removing it from the ulum al-ala because actually the Hanafis are ala tariq al-fuqaha, which is very different to the tariq al-mutakallimin. So that's why I'm going to make it a maqsid from the ulum al-maqasid, so to speak. So I'll talk about that shortly. Then of course you have other general sciences as well, which are sometimes subject specific. So the ulum which pertain to revelation, for example, like the ulum al-Quran, now all of the ulum within that, ilm al-rasam, and all of those types of things, and similarly with ilm al-tajweed and the qira'at, similarly with respect to hadith and ilm of jarh wa ta'dil, and the other ulum of hadith, like just the general mustalahat, and so on and so forth. So there are many ulum which relate to the masadir, so to speak. And again, there's many of those key conversations which pertain to the istinbat of ahkam and the like. You will find them in usul fiqh. This is why usul fiqh is so incredibly important, that a sound and solid study of usul al-fiqh, it colors so much of your ilmi outlook. And without doing this, especially as a Hanafi, because it's many of the perspectives are very different. And you miss out on that when you're a Hanafi and you're reading the waraqat, for example. or you're reading other Shafi'i, Joani's texts, or you're reading other generic kind of texts on usul al-fiqh, some contemporary author on something. Again, these types of things might give you generic knowledge, but you won't get the ilm tafsili until you study these types of sciences bid-diqqa, right? So with precision, you have to kind of go to these ulum, and then you learn so much. So although you have these ulum which are connected to the masadir, they are, when it pertains to the istinbat, they are specific. So it's all well and good you reading musalahatul hadith. This is all wonderful in jarh and ta'dil and so on and so forth. This is great. But as long as you are reading books of hadith and you're in the hadith world, because the minute you come to try to think about ahkam shar'iyya, and what constitutes a dalil, and so on, who is an acceptable rawi, and so on and so forth, you've left that world. And if you don't recognize that as a Hanafi, then you end up being in that world and trying to operate like that. But the standards are slightly different, because it's not the nature of the we're not talking about the tawathuq, the authentication of specific words, going back to the Prophet ﷺ, determining the soundness of such words, but it's about determining the soundness of amal. So the perspective actually differs, and that has huge implications. So for example, you'll study about in ulum al-Quran, it's all well and good, any the kinds of texts, whether it's Suyuti's Itqan or others, the Burhan and other books which have been authored right up until the recent period, then it's all well and good. But for example, one of the things that you'll study is the idea of naskh. Now, the theory of naskh is madhab specific. So if you simply take it from ulum al-Quran and you make this your deen, because this is ulum al-Quran, and you make this your perspective, so to speak, then you simply will either misapply it or misunderstand what the ulama are actually doing over here, or you'll just have a headache trying to make sense of what the ulama are saying over here versus that, or you'll try to give precedence to again the Shafi'i authors doing ulum al-Quran versus whether the Hanafis have already talked about these types of things, which is usul al-fiqh. Because again, it's one of those sciences which is quite jami'. Mustalahatul hadith, like I said, where do you learn a lot of these details? Usul al-fiqh. So there's so much which is jam-packed within usul al-fiqh that you miss out on if you try to get it from, what you miss out on is the Hanafi being a true Hanafi in terms of how you are functioning in the world, in terms of how you are seeing the madhab, in terms of how you are interpreting revelation, and so on and so forth, that you're not going to be doing it in a way which is muwafiq to your aba. So everything you're learning in Quduri, everything you learn from all of your fiqh studies and aqida and everything else, it's not going to correspond to some of your other ilmi world now, unless you take it, like I said, udkhulu fi silmi kaffatan. You have to take the madhab all together, the whole thing, not just a part of the madhab, right? So this is also a very important aspect to this. Finally, I guess just before I get into the final group of things that you could say, sciences which are again other generic sciences which pertain to the person of the Prophet ﷺ. So again, this is not it's not part of it's a separate set of sciences. So whether it be sirah or shama'il or khasa'is or the battles or anything else, right? So anything which is connected to the Prophet ﷺ, again, those types of things are outside the scope of our discussion right now. I'm not gonna, because I'm talking about building a Hanafi library, so I'm focused on specific masail and the like, and a specific vision of understanding the Sharia which the Hanafis had and they employed, and you miss it if you're not paying attention to what exactly, to how they're living and how they're functioning, and what has been transmitted down to us. So having said all of that now, of course, you have the key sciences, which, and I'll be talking about specific texts and the like, such as, the fiqh and the usul and the aqida, and even works in tasawwuf, but I'll just call more generically, I'll just refer to it as adab. And then you have works on some hadithi types of works. You also have tafsir, so you have tafsir, and then you have, I'll say another whole genre. Of course, when I said fiqh, then there's many subgenres to this as well. So I'm not trying to define every possible thing, but these are just some key areas. Everyone still hear me? Something happened. Oh, okay, great. I'm back now. Okay, great. So I guess you could say there's also the realm of dictionaries and the like. This is also important. Again, these types of things, the ulama are very expressive of what is in people's interests, but it's just about how much you're paying attention. So there's one book which I'll talk about very shortly, but this is Al-Qurashi, who is the author of Al-Jawahir al-Mudiyya. He actually has a takhrij of the hadith of the Hidayah, which came out recently, I guess, but he actually mentions in there that the alfaz, that whenever he was trying to give definitions, then he used a certain book, and he says فَإِنَّهُ كِتَابٌ عَظِيمٌ فِي أَلْفَاظِ أَصْحَابِنَا. So he says, tremendous book with respect to the words used by our ashab. So this is important because it's going to teach us something, because the various madhabs, they have dictionaries. So if you just use anything, or you're just even worse, just going to like Hans Wehr or something, which is fine if somebody doesn't know a generic word, but the idea is that at the beginning, for example, but as you progress, you have to progress to the fiqh dictionaries, where it doesn't mean what you think it means. Right? It doesn't mean what it says in the dictionary. That's not what it means. It actually means something else, and it doesn't mean what the Shafi'i said it means. So you have to be careful also about some of these types of things, which again, not everybody is necessarily always paying attention to. They're not necessarily always cognizant of these types of things. And perhaps the final area that I'll mention is basically the realm of the tabaqat or the manaqib, which is again about building, because remember, it's building a Hanafi library, so you want to learn. Part of that is knowing your aba, right? So knowing your fathers, forefathers in ilm, knowing who they are, because the ulama are talking about them all the time. So you have to be aware of who these people are, and also learning about the imams of the deen. Imams of the deen, i.e. from the Hanafi perspective, Imam Abu Hanifa himself, and the works written about him, and also Abu Yusuf and Muhammad and Zufar and so on, these specific texts which were written with respect to these great imams, and also those who came after them, which even there are even contemporary works. Of course, the books are never-ending. It seems that there's such a tremendous legacy and tradition which has left. Much of Hanafi scholarship is still left languishing unpublished, unfortunately, in manuscripts all over the world. So we hope someday that we'll be able to see more of that tremendous tradition which we have. But alhamdulillah, we have a slowly growing corpus of text. So inshallah, I'll try to focus on those types of things. I'm not going to start talking about manuscripts and things that you can't really access or are difficult to access, because there's a tremendous amount out there. So right now, and in the ensuing discussion, the focus is going to be on the kind of books which are already available. So if you look at the hadith of Sayyidina Jibreel, then you have the idea of Iman, Islam, Ihsan. So these are key areas that the Hanafis have actually written on. So you want to ensure that not only is your fiqh, your outward practice of fiqh, which is termed al-fiqh al-asghar, that this corresponds to the madhab, but also your fiqh al-akbar, because fiqh al-asghar is also, you can split it into two types as well, the zahir and the batin, that which is outward and that which is inward, that which pertains to your heart and that which pertains to the outward limbs. Because even in some matters related to akhlaq, there are differences. Not everything, of course, because some of those things are still generic. You still enter into this generic world, such as, for example, generosity, right? Generosity or pride, right? And the definitions of these types of things, even though the nature of what constitutes generosity might change from one culture to the next. For example, that's the nature of the kayf, but those are secondary discussions. But as for it as a khuluq, then it's shared. Everybody would agree about it. But there are other things, for example, like ghiba, where the ahkam are different. The ahkam aren't the same across the madhabs, and similarly with other issues. So this is why it's important to pay attention to writings in these different genres, because they actually, when you take these ulum from ulama who are operating across all of these spheres, right? So they're operating in the fiqh world, in the adab world, and also in the aqida world. I'm just sufficing with this right now. Of course, they're operating elsewhere as well. But then it really behooves us to think about how we're receiving the deen. Because if you're kind of taking half your deen from Shafa'is, whether it be in aqida or anything else, you're kind of taking that from somewhere. Even though the Imam, the same Hafidhuddin al-Nasafi, or Najmuddin al-Nasafi, who wrote tremendous books in fiqh, he's the same guy who wrote, who taught you usul fiqh. Is the same guy who's teaching you aqida. Right? It's the same guy. So the Aqaid al-Nasafiyah, who is it? Najmuddin Nasafi, who's a great imam, whose tafsir is published. Right? So his tafsir is published. Now we also have a book on usul, where he summarized Alauddin as-Samarqandi's work. It's called Tahsib al-Usul fiqh. Inshallah, it'll be it's coming soon. Inshallah, it's a preview to an upcoming course, but that'll be in Arabic, I guess. That's coming up on the Irshad Centre for Hanafi Studies soon. And he also has his book, the Manzuma, Al-Manzumatun Nasafiyah. Right, so this Manzuma is here. Actually, interestingly enough, the Manzuma, it's called the Manzumat al-Khilafiyat, but I just realized that his commentary, which is the Hasr al-Masail, is also published. So the corpus of texts is always increasing, and there's a great deal which is there. But of course, just as an aside, what happens is easy to get overwhelmed as well with the number of books, and when there's a lot of books, and then people, you don't want to end up in just again, it goes back to buying a book, and then you end up just with FOMO. I say this a lot now, but the first time I heard of it, I had to ask somebody what that meant. But then it just you end up with FOMO, and this is not a good vibe. You don't want to be purchasing books just for that sake, but also you don't want to overwhelm yourself, because this is also it's also going to hinder your progress. Why? Because you're trying to check 27 books, and this is why sometimes I discourage people from reading which 3 books should I read on the side. You don't read 3 books on the side. Just focus on the book that you're studying. If you've got time after that, then we can consider maybe 1 book. But otherwise, if you're reading 3 books, you're not gaining anything. Even though you think, especially when it's in your early days of talab al-ilm, the focus should be you shouldn't simply be distracted. By the time you get to the end, it's not simply about ittila' ala al-masail, but it's about hifz of those masail. Because the faqih is man hafidh al-furu', is the one who has memorized the masail. Excuse me. It doesn't need it necessarily be actual memorization, hifz, although this is good and it's ideal when people are able to do something like that. But there's also effectively memorizing things when you understand what's happening and you can replicate it even if you can't use the exact same words. This is what it means, is that you have done hifz of the ma'ani of these masail. And that's basically, this is what we're seeking. And part of that manifest, like how do you maintain it for the rest of your life? It's through the tatbiq. It's through the practice of the Sharia, which also relates to an asl of Imam Abu Hanifa with respect to the hifz of the marwi, memorization of that which has been transmitted. So with respect to the rawi, he has to have what he is transmitting memorized, and this is quite significant. And the way the ulama explained this is that he would be practicing what he is transmitting. So this is a part of it, and this is part of the tathabbut of the ilm, that it won't manifest until somebody really dedicates their life to it and ensures that everything they take has a manifestation in the world. So yeah, so sorry, I've just seen a question. Any recommendations with regard? Sorry, there's something was in the way which doesn't let me see questions. The most recent question properly, but I assume it says with regards to Hanafi tasawwuf works. Yeah, inshallah, I'll be mentioning a couple of things, inshallah, in due course. I might as well take a couple of the questions now. Given that I've taken your question, I'll go back. Yeah, what are the other examples of adab among طلاب العلم? Of course, there are entire books which are written on this. So one example is the Ta'lim al-Muta'allim. It's worth getting hold of if you're able to access the Arabic. Otherwise, I think Instruction of the Student. I think there's a couple of translations floating around. You might be able to access those and benefit from it. But again, these types of things, it's not just a self-reading, although that's useful, but you actually have to see living, walking realities of these types of things, and this is where things really hit home. And this is why Suhbah is important, and this is why you should learn the adab of the talib al-ilm from a teacher, just like everything else. And then you have the other books which are written as well, like the Tadhkirat al-Sami' al-Mutakallim. I think that also has a translation now. You can find that as well. Maybe it has a couple of translations. And there's many other books as well. Somebody asked what Hanafi Shuruhat are a must-have. Again, I'll get to some of specific titles soon, and also Mutun. Yeah, I mean, we'll get to that. Also, walaikum salam. I guess there's a lot of people saying salam. So, walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, jami'an. I apologize, I'm not looking at everybody's salams. And yeah, there's please share tips on how to read, meaning how to engage in active, reflective reading as opposed to passive reading. Okay, I'll see if we have time for that a bit later. How necessary are physical books as opposed to digital PDFs? Most necessary. It depends. It depends. When it comes to the essential texts that you are studying, there's something real about being able to have the book open, turn the pages, and so on and so forth, and find things more easily. Kind of flick through, and that type of thing is more natural. doesn't negate the fact that there's a benefit to a digital copy sometimes, especially when somebody has a lot of books. So it might be like a secondary text, for example, secondary or tertiary text that one is using digital copies. But as for one's primary text, then some of the ulama, they talk about the importance of having like a central text, such that you even graduate, so to speak, with this text. So, like for example, Qurashi again is one of those who mentions that Khulasatu Dala'il, which is the Sharh of Quduri, is by Hussam Din Razi. This is the text that I graduated with, right? So I used this, and I learned everything. It's the central thing. I put all my fawaid and everything in it, and then I memorized this, and I learned all of this, and it's what I graduated with. So there's a sense of that as well, which is not necessarily realized through digital copies, also because you can accidentally delete things and all of that type of stuff, which doesn't necessarily happen in the real world. So I think there's certainly a barakah and a benefit in having physical copies of at least the books that you will be studying, and central books which you'll need access to, but not necessarily every single thing. That there's also a fa'idah, and alhamdulillah, we're blessed that we're able to kind of use the digital services, whether it be the Shamila or otherwise, to attain ilm as well, and to access the masail of ilm as well. Allahu a'lam. I think just on a note on the question on reflective reading, it's really just about being engaged. That you have to, how to be engaged. You have to be awake and alert, and you have to progress. That you'll find that your questions in the first year or the first time reading the books are not necessarily the same the second year. And when you practice those masail, and when you live in the world, and when you experience other people's questions, and so on and so forth, when you read other texts, when you do secondary readings, and so on, then you bring all of those questions and all of those masail back to the book, and then you read it again, and then you have new questions. Then you start asking new things. So the first level, this is why they talk about the depths of reading, that you start with the tahleel al-ibarat, that just trying to understand what exactly the author is saying. What are the words, and so on and so forth. What does this mean? What does that mean? What is the sentence saying? What's the mubtada? What's the khabar? This is the kind of question that people are going to have at the beginning. I don't understand this masala. I don't understand what that means. And it's tasawwur, it's conceptual kind of issues. And then later on, once you read it again, or you're reading the same masala, maybe a different book, maybe a commentary, maybe something else, then it becomes more about asking questions about more detailed things. For example, like certain quyud, certain conditions, whether they are present or whether they are not present. You might start asking questions with respect to certain detailing and certain secondary issues which are based upon this. Then what's the nature of this asl, for example? You might start asking questions about istihsan and qiyas. And then if you go even further, then you might start exploring the nature of the adilla which have been transmitted, and how this corresponds to them, and so on. So the idea is that necessarily things get deeper and deeper, and also the nature of your engagement will increase as the more you are exposed to. So you can bring in those other masail, and then you end up exploring everything and trying to make sense, because the point is not that you learn a book, but you have to learn the science. Right? So from the fiqh of ilm is that you learn the science, not that you simply learn the book. The book is there, remember, as a wasila. It is a means for you to, i.e. the path that you traverse, so that you attain unto the ilm. You enter the mayadeen of ilm. So if you get through the book and now you're only able to understand the book, but you don't understand the science yet, then this was not a sound reading of the text. You didn't actually study this text. So this is also what we have to consider when we read books and study books with mashayikh and with teachers and in circles and or alone. That are we actually benefiting? Are we entering into the mayadeen? And the sign of that is that your questions are getting more and more deeper and more nuanced. You're getting more and more clarity with respect to what's happening and how to answer, because even answering questions is another level. This is not the first level. This is why it's a mistake of beginner talib al-ilm of طلاب العلم, or beginners, to start answering people's questions. Like, you're not trained. Like, you can't even answer your own questions, let alone somebody else's questions. So that, again, a conversation maybe for another time. But these are a couple of notes. But again, I guess it's something that we could explore later, because otherwise people have their brains turned off and they are just passively kind of reading something, and then they'll say at the end that I read it, but they don't really. It's just murur kiram, as they say, just passing by, just generically with dignity, and that's it, and that's the extent of that's the only thing you gain from it. Are enrichment readings recommended with the text being taught? Not necessarily, but you have to go back to your teachers and ask them the benefit, because sometimes a book which you think is reasonable to read might be a bad choice. It might be a bad choice because it's going to negatively impact your study over here. This is why everybody should have real living teachers. There's another reason. Because otherwise, again, this is an example. This would be an example of somebody doing something alone, unless the teacher has recommended it. That, okay, he has said, that read this particular thing, that this will be of benefit. But otherwise, people doing things on their own, then it only causes them to get confused, especially if they've chosen the wrong thing to read. Sometimes it's not about. Nobody is preventing you from reading any of the Masail of Ilm by anybody of the tradition. But the point is that you have to be prepared. You have to be trained. That once you're trained to read, and what that means is that you have to block off the noise. So if you don't block off the noise, then you can never attain unto a point whereby you can welcome everything of the tradition. That's why the Ottomans, first of all, in some of the curricula, they wouldn't even open a book of hadith for 9 years. And what are they doing? Ulum al-ala, fiqh, usul, like the ancillary sciences. They're studying law and legal theory and kalam and all, and critical, dialectics and engagement and logic and all of these types of things, so that they're preparing their minds and hearts. And then in order to graduate from some of those curricula, you had to write a hashiyah on Baydawi. So Al-Qadi al-Baydawi is one of the great tafsir of the tradition. But the great muhashin, the great glosses which were authored on Baydawi, some of the greats are all Hanafi Maturidis, right? Because they use Baydawi as like the basis. So what do? Anytime he's being a bit Shafi'i, you tell him he's wrong. And anytime he's being a bit Ash'ari, you show him how he's wrong. And anytime he's bringing out like this Shafi'i Ash'ari worldview, right? So you say that's all wrong. It's supposed to be a Hanafi Maturidi worldview. So all of this type of, so if you don't have that ability, then you shouldn't be reading that. That's why if the only tafsir which you read as a talib al-ilm, for example, is Jalalain, and you haven't understood the Quran according to the Hanafis, because there are many, of course, again, even with the ayat the ayatul ahkam is almost like a separate science altogether. And that's why you can find many books. Of course, like one of the great books of the tradition is the Ahkam al-Quran of Jassas. And finally, did the Ma'ani get, there's a couple more questions. Did the Ma'ani get lost in translation? Yes, that's certainly possible. Why? Because I'm just translating the word, whereas the maqsid is not the word. But in translation, the maqsid is, even though it's the ma'na of these words, but it's not necessarily the depth of those ma'ani, because I'm just trying to express to you what he's saying. So it's an English, for example, an English expression now of those same ma'ani. But I can't transmit those ma'ani unless I do a sharh. So yeah, definitely you could say the ma'ani can get lost in translation. Should one read a madkhal before exploring the depths of a particular science? This is probably helpful, but it's not necessarily always so easy to find such things. But it's also the wisdom in why the ulama authored and wrote on the Mabadi al-Ashara. these 10 foundational sciences. So this is supposed to be like a madkhal. That it gives you an opportunity to think about the masail, what the masail look like, what the definition of the science is, what's the purpose, who's the founder, what are its sources, what do you need to study, because this helps you understand what are the simple sciences, so to speak, that they aren't reliant upon anything else. And then you have the compound, so to speak, sciences, which are based upon like other sciences. Yeah, so I guess the questions will be endless, and we haven't really got to the speaking about specific books. So inshallah, I'll talk about specific books now, yeah. So that's what we'll do for the remainder, inshallah, of the session. So I talked about these various angles and the various sciences, and the importance of building a library which covers these various facets and these various sciences, and ensuring that your readings and your studies are in line with what these ulama are trying to transmit to you. Because, like I said, the same faqih who's transmitting to you Kanz al-Daqa'iq is the same guy who's writing the tafsir, Madarik al-Tanzil. Right? So he's the same guy who's also teaching you aqida. That's why he wrote the Umdatul Aqaid. He's also the same guy who's writing usul al-fiqh. So he wrote the Manar al-Anwar. And if you look at all of the ulama, they're all doing this. They're teaching you the entire tradition. So there's something very interesting about the Hanafi tradition, the Hanafi and the ulama, and the way that they transmitted it. And it manifests in when you study fiqh and how the ulama across madhabs talk about the Hanafi school. And they talk about Imam Abu Hanifa and the nature of his istinbat, for example. Imam Sha'rani, the Shafi'i, is radiallahu ta'ala anhu, has many statements, right, about the Abu Hanifa and his madhab. And you find manaqib works written by Shafi'is and the like Imam Dhahabi and Ibn Hajar al-Haytami and Suyuti and others. So there's a lot of praise for the distinct manner of doing fiqh of Imam Abu Hanifa. Similarly, the Hanafis have their own tradition in aqida, like the Maturidi way is quite different to the Ash'ari. Of course, they're all from the Ahlul Sunnah, but it's about specific choices and a specific worldview, and that's why some of the ulama have made lengthy lists about all the differences between the manahij. Similarly, with the usul al-fiqh, that's why the first thing you study is tariqatul fuqaha versus tariqatul mutakallimin. So they're showing you that Hanafis are in a different world. So now for fiqh, for usul, for aqida, they keep telling you the Hanafis are in a different world. So this should teach us something. Right? This should teach us something. Similarly, with some of the commentaries on hadith, which is not necessarily a popular area for writing when it comes to Hanafis, that you don't find a great deal over there. It's because Hadithi engagement, I guess it was outside the. They didn't treat it like it was generic. It's not like the Nas of the Quran, so to speak, because everybody wrote a tafsir. I mean, there are so many tafsir. But and the Hanafis, they seem to quite that seemed to be like a hallmark that was part of the project, that an explanation of wahi comes through the writing of a tafsir, and that's why you also see it amongst the graduating Ottoman ulama as well. That class, those graduating classes, writing these commentaries and notes. Many of the Ottomans, you see them writing these types of things, Hawashi and Baydawi and other texts and the like. But hadith, it was a lot more because they're coming from a specific author. So a specific author is going to give you, for example, his point of view. So this is not conducive. This is like a Hanafi going to a Shafi'i text, for example, and trying to explain it according to the Hanafi school. So whether it be Imam Nawawi in Riyadh al-Salihin, where of course necessarily there are many hadiths which are generic in nature, but there are some which are specific, which speak to ahkam shar'iyya, and he transmits, of course, naturally the Shafi'i positions. You cannot take that as if it's a sunnah. Rather, it needs to be understood in light of what the Hanafis have said. You have to employ, you have to look in the Hanafi books, you have to look at the books of fiqh, you have to think about usul al-fiqh, you have to think about many things. So similarly with other authors, whether it be the Kutub al-Sitta or others, there's a lot to kind of consider, and that's potentially the reason why there aren't any significant kind of writings in hadith, even though hadith al-ahkam does eventually become somewhat popularized, and there are some books. But now we're on the topic of hadith. I'll just mention a couple of things. Of course, it's always good to start with books that you are actively studying. Whatever the sheikh or the instructor is kind of recommending what you're studying together, that's where you want to begin. And then you would build around that. So if you're studying it, then perhaps you get to the end. Perhaps now when you're going to transition to something else, you also at this point you might get a commentary or something, and then you'll start reading the commentary of the previous book. So that's an opportunity to kind of review. The one thing I will say about commentaries, because I know somebody previously asked also about commentaries, that you do actually have to be trained to read a commentary just like you are trained to read a matan. So it's not simply straightforward. Remember, I was teaching a short text, the Ithaf al-Talib by Abu Bakr al-Ahsa'i, and he has a commentary on it as well, which is called the Minhaj al-Talib. So the Minhaj al-Talib, he had basically done a commentary on this short text which he had authored on ibadat and a few masail of aqidah and a few masail of tasawwuf, but his commentary was based on the Durr al-Mukhtar of Alauddin al-Haskafi, and this is basically the sharh which Ibn Abidin wrote his famous hashia, his gloss on. So this was by no means a straightforward commentary on a basic text. Like it's almost like the commentary is too complex, is far too complicated for the text. I mean, it's not actively, it's not, of course it's understandable and the like, but I just mean that it needn't have been taken from something like the Dur, but that's what he chose to do. So it's not that, so it's not so easy to turn around and say, I'm just going to read the commentary now, because you don't know the kalimat of how the ulama speak in commentaries. You don't know what they're trying to achieve. You don't know where they're taking it from. That's why knowing, as we talked about before, you don't do talab al-ilm alone, rather you enter into a family, so to speak. You have to recognize the masail of ilm are part of a family, and the kutub themselves are part of a family. That one book is based upon another book. This is the asl for this book and this book and this book. And knowing the ansab of kutub is also a ilm. Right? This is also from the ulum. So it's also a part of this entire process. So assuming that you have access to the commentary or something, but you'd start with the smaller book, and then you would transition to the next book again with the taking the nasiha of the sheikh and the like, until you graduate, at which point by all means the rest of the the world is your Hanafi oyster. So you can do what you want at that point, but it's just prior to that point you want to ensure that you're reading the right things, because you want to be trained. Once you are trained, then the doors are open. Then you can read whatever you like, because at this point the idea is that you have attained unto the fiqh of ilm and the ulum themselves, the asrar of these ulum, and now everything is open. You can benefit from whatever is available. So there are significant books for the Hanafi. I said hadith, so I'll just start with this. But the Kitab al-Athar, both recensions, both Abu Yusuf and Muhammad, are both printed. They are extremely significant compendia of the hadith of Imam Abu Hanifa. In fact, some of the most reliable recensions, they say, some of the ulama equate it, the Kitab al-Athar, to the Muwatta of Imam Malik. Not exactly the same, but in the sense of the kind of tabaqa of this type of text. So if you're looking for Hanafi hadiths and the like, then this is going to be a useful source. Similarly, the Masanid of Abu Hanifa, of course, some of the later musnads, like the organization of Haskafi, not Alauddin al-Haskafi, was another Haskafi, or the recension of Haskafi, sorry, there was Sorry, I think I just confused myself. But anyway, I'll stick with the recension of Haskafi, of the Musnad of Imam Abu Hanifa, but you have a lot of later commentaries like Muhammad Abid al-Sindi and the like, so multi-volume, 7 volumes. You have other 2 or 3 volume commentaries on these types of things, but even just the Musnad itself, again, sometimes people ask for these types of things, but these are kind of like the sources. Similarly, the Mu'tamad, which just came out, which is an ikhtisar of Khawarizmi's Musnad of Imam Abu Hanifa by Jamal al-Din al-Qunawi, that's also an important book. And then you have the books on Hadith al-Ahkam, like the Uqud al-Jawahir al-Munifa by Sayyid Murtada al-Zabidi. So Sayyid Murtada al-Zabidi. Of course, there's also contemporary efforts and the like, but these are just some examples. Whilst we're on the topic of Hadith, even just some texts in Mustalahat al-Hadith, they kind of speak to Hanafis. So one of them is the Qafm al-Athar, which was actually published by Sheikh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda, and he often kind of references like Hanafi, the Hanafi masters and their positions on certain issues, even if in that context they're only a bit theoretical, because they're speaking about different worlds, really. Recently, I think there was a republication of something that's been published before as well, the Im'an al-Nadhar by one of the Sindhi Mashayikh, that also speaks to Hanafis in the sense that he kind of points out what Hanafis are saying as well. But like I mentioned before, the place to find these types of things actually in usul al-fiqh. Right, so usul al-fiqh. I'm just going to ask again because it's been quiet for a while, if everybody is still here. Still hear me and everything, and it's still following. Okay, great. Okay, you never know with technology these days. So if we transition now to things like tafsir. Again, tafsir a bit tricky. Jamal al-Din al-Qunawi again does have a work in Ayatul Ahkam, but unfortunately it's not printed. I hope that will come out at some point as well. Otherwise, you have major works like the Ahkam al-Quran of Jassas. You have Mullah Jiwan, Tafsirat al-Ahmadiyya. Mullah Jiwan being the author of Nur al-Anwar. So you have those types of books, and then people sometimes ask about Hanafi tafsir, and of course there are so many Hanafi tafsir. But the point is that they're giving you a Hanafi perspective, not necessarily always, not necessarily all authors, and particularly some of the later authors just being impacted by what's happening in different trends in the Muslim world and the like, and writings and stuff. But certainly some of the more authoritative figures are very clearly operating in a certain direction. So the Madarik al-Tanzil, of course, is a really important text. So for example, at Al-Azhar, they will study, as far as I'm aware, they have the Madarik al-Tanzil, or at least a simplified version of it, which they would study. Then you have lots of larger tafsir as well, like the Tafsir Abu Saud, Irshad al-Aql al-Salim, إلى مزايا القرآن الكريم, one of the great tafsir. And you have Abu Layth al-Samarqandi, the Bahr al-Ulum, for example. You have Najmuddin Nasafi's Taysir fi Tafsir. So really, there are many options, but of course, in building now, it's just in the same way. You would start with just one thing, one small thing. Tafsir al-Nasafi, for example, that's it. You can get it in 2 volumes. I think they reprinted it recently, maybe in 3 volumes or 4 volumes. They get larger and larger books, unfortunately. But I have an edition. It's 2 volumes. So that's, for example, if you have that, you have a really important authoritative tafsir on your bookshelf. So and so by all means, if you're studying Jalalain or something because it's part of the curriculum, that's all well and good. Keep your eye on Tafsir al-Nasafi. If you notice differences, then note them down. So that's the thing. So it's not, you can't necessarily always control, of course, I don't suggest it either, control your teachers or control curricula and these types of things. So sometimes you have to work with the model which you are functioning within, but that doesn't stop you from engaging in your own homework and research and stuff. Of course, you have to ensure that you're understanding things correctly, but assuming that you have the ability, if you're reading tafsir or taking classes and the like, then you've reached an ability whereby you can kind of have a good sense of what's happening, especially if you have other studies under your belt as well. So that's basically some notes on tafsir. When it comes to dictionaries, then of course there are many dictionaries as well. Some of the one I was talking about earlier, which is what Qurashi had mentioned, was one of the great dictionaries of the Hanafis, which is Al-Mughrib fi Tartib Al-Mu'rib by Al-Mutarrazi, who was the student of Al-Zamakhshari. Zamakhshari, of course, sorry, I missed him in tafsir, but of course he's not a, if you have the Madarik al-Tanzil, it's a Sunni version of Zamakhshari. So Zamakhshari being one of the great tafsir of the tradition as well. So this is a Mughrib. The Tilbatu Talaba by Najm al-Din Nasafi, the same Najm al-Din Nasafi that I was talking about earlier. Again, what does he say in this introduction? He says, students are confused about the words which our Hanafi authors and masters are using. So they asked me to write something. So he says, I've compiled this entire dictionary. So you just have this one book. It's just one volume. Right? Just one volume. You have that on your shelf. That's it. Anytime you're in Hanafi fiqh and you're confused about a word, is a dictionary. Of course, you have to progress in your Arabic until you get to the point where you can understand these types of things. But the idea is that you don't need 10 dictionaries. Right? So, of course, as you, like I mentioned at the beginning, I've already talked about the nature of progression and how people have different needs at different times. So right now, I'm just talking about building your library. This is the specific topic of the day now. So building this library, you just have that one that might be good enough for the time, whether it be the Mughrib, for example, just again, one volume, or the Tilbatu Talaba, or even the Mukhtar al-Sihah of Razi being the author of the Tuhfat al-Muluk. So Tuhfat al-Muluk being a short primer, a short matan in fiqh. So that author, he also has a dictionary. This is the Mukhtar. But usually the kind of dictionaries that explicitly mentioned, like Najm al-Din Nasafi, that he wrote it for the alfaz of the ashab, or those which have been recommended by the ulama, those are going to be more significant. Those are the ones that you wanted to kind of direct yourself to. So that's dictionaries. Again, it's not a huge thing, but you can kind of grow from one point, from a more straightforward dictionary, whether it be the not necessarily straightforward, but I mean one dictionary, to having access to 2 dictionaries, for example, having access to 3 dictionaries, to having access to the wider tradition, right? So ending up at the Qamus al-Muhit of Al-Fayruzabadi, which is just dictionaries entering into the realm of Lugha now. Just generally speaking, these are Lughawi dictionary. That's a different type of dictionary. Right now I'm talking about dictionaries, fiqhi dictionaries. And this is what is going to directly help the talib al-ilm, i.e. who's a Hanafi. Yeah, so when it comes to biographical works, then one of the again, these are in different orders, and the authors have different maqasid. Sometimes they write in alphabetical order, sometimes they write in the tartib zamani. i.e. they begin at Abu Hanifa and come down to the recent times, and so on and so forth. So one of those is Ibn al-Hana'i, who is Qanali Zada, and he has a Tabaqat al-Hanafiyya, really nice edition published by Dar ibn Hazm. The Muhaqqiq really worked very hard on making corrections, adding further details and the like, so that's quite useful. Another one which is, and that's in order, so to speak, so it goes on tabaqa, but you only end up about the 10th century, so it's only the first 900 years, 900 years, and then it kind of ends at that point. You have the Maham al-Fuqaha by Al-Qadi Kami al-Adarnami. So the Maham al-Fuqaha is very nice as well. It's ordered slightly differently. It's in alphabetical order, but the thing which is useful for students who learn the names of people, for example, Jassas or Bazdawi or Sarakhsi, is that you can simply look up Sarakhsi in Sin or Bazdawi in Ba. Otherwise, you have to know the specific name. So if you look at some other types of dictionaries, you'd have to know the specific name of the author in order to find his biography. So here he goes by the his ascription, what he was known by. So that makes it really easy to find. Qadi Khan is really easy to find. You don't have to know Qadi Khan's actual name. So Marghinani is easy to find. You don't have to know that he is whatever, Ali ibn Abi Bakr or anything else. You don't have to know specific names. So that's also really useful. So if you just have like one dictionary like that, then you have a source. Why is this useful now when you're doing fiqh and you come across somebody? Don't just go past them. If he's Al-Qadi Al-Isbijabi, should look up who that is. And this is why you also have to study the Tabaqat al-Fuqaha. You have to study the ulama themselves, so you can actually benefit from the words and statements, and you can feel the impact of them saying that Sarakhsi said such and such, or Isbijabi said it, or Jassas, and so on. What is the name of the dictionary by Najmuddin Nasafi? The Tilbatul Talaba. Tilbatul Talaba. Of course, one of the later books, which includes other people, is the Fawaid al-Bahiyya by Abdul Hayy al-Akrawi, which also has a beautiful new edition published by Dar al-Qalam, with also his Darb al-Amathil, which was his own compilation after that. So it's 2 volumes. That's really nice. But again, it's tricky in that it's in alphabetical order. So this is not so easy for people. But it's not like it's impossible. If it has a good index, then you're still able to use it. But anyway, I've made a couple of, and that's why I've made a couple of suggestions. Just so if you know, for example, roughly when the author was. So if you know nothing about them, you only know his name, Qadi Khan, then Maham al-Fuqaha is the place to go. If you know roughly, or you're looking for a certain period, then Qanali Zada's work, for example, is useful. If you want something that's more expansive, then you have the likes of Kafawi's Kataib A'lam al-Akhyar. So the Kataib A'lam al-Akhyar, 4 thick volumes published in Turkey, and that's also a very useful work. The Jawahir al-Mudiyya of Qurashi, of course, is very important, but again, that's quite large, 5 volumes. There's an ikhtisar of it by Mullah Ali al-Qari, Al-Athmar al-Janiyya. That's in 1 thick volume. So there's, so you just need to start with, in terms of building, you just need one, right? So one thing that you think is the most helpful, what's going to be the most helpful to me, you just use that. And then as you grow, because you don't need everything at this time. And the point is not to just acquire them, but to benefit from them. So if you find that there's other people that this is not fulfilling the need, and so on and so forth, you need further details, the ikhtisar is not good enough, I need the asl now, and then that's how you would grow. Right, so slowly you would set aside, funding for that, as long as you are fulfilling your other quotas in terms of reading any, essential texts or side readings or commentaries or anything else which is required for your other studies with your teachers. Of course, other later books like Sheikh Muhammad Zahid al-Kawthari and his Husn al-Taqadi, and his basically his 2-volume compendium compiled or worked on by Dr. Hamza al-Bakri in Istanbul, published by Dar al-Fath. This is on the Imams again, so that's and he also has on Muhammad ibn Shira'a and also al-Tahawi, so that's quite useful as well, because he's a very tahqiqi as well. So he talks about Abu Yusuf, and then there's always a bunch of fawaid, and then Sheikh Hamza is also one of the great muhaqqiqeen, so he also has a lot of fawaid in his footnotes. So something like that, just for Abu Yusuf and Muhammad and so on, even that would be sufficient. So 2 volumes of that, and then some book like the Maham al-Fuqaha or the Tabaqat al-Hanafiyya, and you're good for the time being. Manaqib works, different options, but again, start with just one, whether it be a short one, whether it be a Hanafi or not be a Hanafi. That's not essential right now, because it's just about learning Abu Hanifa. You should learn about Abu Hanifa. You should learn who he was, how he was, and what he did, what he was like, because all of these things. This is why the ulama gathered the books like the Sifatul Safwa or Hilyatul Awliya. So what happens? You learn about the ahwal of the salihin and the awliya, and then you can inherit the ahwal, the way that they were, in being with your teachers, and you benefit from the ahwal of the awliya, and then you're able to change your life thereby as well. But also an aib for you to not know anything about Abu Hanifa. So you should have a book, one of the manaqib works. One of the recent ones is Akhbar Abi Hanifa, which was published by Dar al-Siraj. It just came out. Of course, there was an old print, but this is one of the newest works on the manaqib. So this is by Saymari. So this is a useful work. Of course, you can transition away, to other books, because there's Ibn Abi al-Awam, for example, is Fada'il Abi Hanifa. That's one of the great books on Fada'il. That's probably similar in size. You have the Manaqib of Az-Zaranjari, that's also published. You have these are all the Manaqib of Imam Abu Hanifa. You have the Kashf al-Athar al-Sharifa. This is 2 thick volumes published in Turkey. This is on the Manaqib of Abu Hanifa by Al-Ustadh As-Sabadhmuni. So again, you can transition from one, and then once you've been through one, you can get like another one, and then. But the idea is that it should be strategic choices. Then. Not that. It's done. I can see a number of comments now that it's lagging. Back. Okay, good. Yeah, inshallah. So bear with me. I know it's been a while. I wasn't actually expecting it for it to be this long, but inshallah, I'm coming to the end now, and I know Maghrib time has also ended over here, so we'll have to end very soon. Okay, so I think I talked now about the tabaqat and the like. So I'll move back now to. To other. I'm just thinking. Okay, let me go a few more minutes and then I'll make a decision. Yeah, I think we need a part 2. Yeah. I'm trying to do it all in one, but I guess push for time. let me do my best with what remains in the next 5 minutes or so. At least this can be like a madkhal. And then, inshallah, yeah, they need a series and a podcast. Yeah, inshallah, we'll have to think about all of these types of things. But let me just quickly round off what we have left, and then, inshallah, we can call it a day. So I'll leave fiqh till last. So if we talk about tasawwuf and the like, of course, sometimes people get it's not so much about the metaphysical component, but it's about the development of the akhlaq and the practical tasawwuf, the tatbiq of the sharia, the practice of the sharia and the like. So of course, even books like Ta'aleem al-Muta'allim are very instructive in this regard with respect to how somebody is supposed to be, especially as a talib al-ilm. But then you have books like Imam Zada's Shar'atul Islam, one of the great books of the Hanafi tradition, which had many large commentaries, as did Ta'aleem al-Muta'allim. So the ulama, they really enjoyed books like the Shar'atul Islam, which talk about practicing and living Islam in your life. One of those commentaries is the Mafatih al-Jinan, which is actually published, but that's the only one, unfortunately, which we have to date. Abu Layth al-Samarqandi actually had an entire project, it seems, that it was a very an adab fiqh faqih. He was a faqih zahid. So this adabi kind of project which he had means that his books were actually filled with so many fawaid. And so much about, again, tasawwuf and living Islam. So Bustan al-Arifin, for example, similarly, his Tanbih al-Ghafilin, these are very important books. There was one of the Hanafis who basically summarized the Ihya, and that is called the Aynul Ilm. It's the Aynul Ilm wa Zaynul Hilm. Another very important book. You have the Mahasinul Islam, which is not really adab or living Islam, but it's more about the hikam of the Sharia, which again is a nice side discussion when it comes to exploring the masail of the madhab. But I've just kind of lumped these things together. And then there's other books like the Rawdatul Quda of Zandawisati and others. I mean, there's a lot. It's not. It's not easy to kind of just say, but the idea is that what do? You begin with one thing, have ta'aleem muta'allim, right? So have the Shari'atul Islam. So I've got something, and then you can grow it to a commentary on this book over here, this larger book over there, and this is how you would progress. Yeah, so more comments on having a podcast. Problem is, if I had a podcast, none of you would listen to it. It becomes the same problem that I mentioned at the beginning. Right? You know, it's like 5 views, 10 views. Like everybody has 1,000 views on the first one. The podcast number 73, there'll be like 3 people who show up. So this is is not that conducive to So I'm missing. Is there a publication? Is there a publication of just a matan of Shari'atul Islam? Yeah, multiple. There's Dar al-Lubab, there's Dar al-Bashair, Dar al-Bashair, there's Dar al-Beiruti. There's like multiple editions of it. Safina podcast it. No, you're just saying that. You won't know till you start. We'll be that's what I'm saying. So if you do your homework and you see who's at number 73, it's only the super keen ones. You guys set it up, I'll do the podcast. So what were we talking about? So we were talking about these works of Adab and the like. So now I guess we can transition to the aqida, and then we're left with fiqh and usul. So when it comes to the aqida, then remember I mentioned that there's an entire tradition, right? So there's an entire tradition, Hanafi Maturidi tradition, and again, you want to start what you want to go with is whenever the teacher is kind of teaching, and then building upon that, and in terms of perhaps commentaries and so on and so forth. But again, with the recognition that you need to be trained to understand what's happening in those commentaries. If they're summarizing like some major commentary or something, then you won't really understand what's happening, even if you studied the method. So that's why even the commentary sometimes it requires actual training, so you know how to read the books. So sometimes it's better to kind of read like the matan multiple times, read a couple of mutun and so on, and then transition to something else. You do so with the sheikh, with your teachers and the like, and then you go through, following that kind of method. And then it becomes meaningful. So of course you have books like the books of Imam Abu Hanifa. So one of the wonderful books that was published in recent times is the Majmu' كتب ورسائل ووصايا الإمام أبي حنيفة by Maktabat Al-Ghanim. It's like a purple cover. So that's nice. It has all the books of Abu Hanifa in it. So that's very useful. And then of course you have some of the commentaries of those books have also been published, like the commentaries of Al-Fiqh Al-Akbar, for example, or the commentaries of the Wasiyah of Imam Abu Hanifa. So these are parts of the, I guess, individual texts which are part of that collation, but they've been published separately. So those are important works. You also have Bad'u al-Amali and all of its commentaries. You have the Umdatul Aqaid, as I mentioned, and its various commentaries by Nasafi and others as well. You have the Sharh, you have the Al-Aqaid al-Nasafiyya. Of course, everybody is familiar with the Sharh al-Aqaid of Imam Taftazani, but of course there's far more simpler commentaries of the the shuruh on the Aqaid al-Nasafiyya as well, like Ibn al-Ghars, for example, that was published by Darul Noor. And there are key works which are useful to have, like the Usul al-Munifa and its commentary Isharat al-Maram, which is also something that Sheikh Muhammad Zahid al-Kawthari was the first to kind of publish. But now, alhamdulillah, we have a couple of new publications of that. But these are examples. And then you have, of course, the Tabsarat al-Adillah. These are kind of like the magnum opus of the Maturidi tradition. You don't just jump to getting the Tabsarat al-Adillah. It's just going to take up shelf space for no reason. But you'd kind of progressively go through the texts and commentaries and maybe a site, maybe something at a similar level, and so on and so forth, till eventually you kind of you're able to kind of build something more significant, especially when you start recognizing the various paths that were taken by different sets of ulama, i.e. the Bukharans have their own manhaj and they have their own conclusions. So of course another book that we have recently that was published is the Usul al-Din by Abu Yusar al-Bazdawi, who is Fakhr al-Islam al-Bazdawi's brother. So he has a significant book. Again, that was Maktabat Al-Ghanim, which is doing some great work, mashallah, publishing Hanafi texts along with Ismail books in the UK, Maktabat Ismail. So a shout out to those guys, even though they're probably not listening and it won't reach them. But anyway, I think you'll benefit from keeping an eye on the kind of publications which are coming out from those publishing houses. And so I'm being a bit briefer now, but that's aqida. And then you have usul al-fiqh. Usul al-fiqh, again, you want to start with the key works, again, considering what you're studying with your teachers and the like. But you have the mukhtasarat and the manar, like Ibn al-Habib is mukhtasar of Nasafi's ikhtisar of his manar. And you also have the Samt al-Wusul al-Qihsari, for example, and the commentaries on those works and the manar itself. And recognizing that some of the masail actually gain in clarity as you go earlier, because the fen, the science becomes something else. The exploration, the way that we're trying to express these masail to you, becomes quite different. So this is something which is worth thinking about as well. And then, of course, you can read Bastawi and its commentaries and Sarakhsi and the like. But again, you don't just publish, you don't just buy Sarakhsi because it's been published. But but it's good to have reference work. Sometimes, if it's going to go out of print or something like that, it's an important reference work. Then this is always istihsan. The qiyas is no, unless you're studying it or you're going to be needing it soon, or you're going to be referencing it, or you've entered into a more research-based field in terms of your talab al-ilm. But if something might otherwise go out of print or something, and it's a realistic thing, like it's happened before, and there's not been reprints and that type of thing, or it's an exclusive publication, those are istihsan. Outside the qiyas, you can buy that thing, put it on your shelf, so you don't regret it later. So there's always a qiyas, always istihsan. So, and usul al-fiqh, again, there's different trajectories. Alauddin al-Samarqandi's Mizan al-Uqul and Najmuddin Nasafi's Tahsil al-Usul al-Fiqh is these are important works. This Tahsil Usul al-Fiqh is the summary of Mizan al-Uqul. So even that one volume, you have these different trajectories. So the point is that you understand the purpose of different texts. Because if you have this, and then I'm going to check it in Tahsil Usul al-Fiqh. So he's coming from a different manhaj. So when you're checking the same mas'ala, he might give you a different answer. So all you're going to end up is confused. He's going to end up confused at the end of it. So so you have to be balanced. There has to be a thoughtful process. You have to consider, you have to consult with your teachers about these types of things. Recognize great works include the Al-Fusul fil Usul by Abu Bakr al-Jassas. Also, we have the Usul al-Saymari, who's the same Saymari who wrote the Akhbar Abi Hanifa. So he has his Usul, which is an ikhtisar of Jassas's Usul. So there's a lot out there. It can be quite overwhelming. But again, like I said, start with what you're studying. It's usually going to be the shorter texts, and consider other texts like it and other commentaries and build from there, and keep consulting and keep asking, and then inshallah you can grow from that. And finally, fiqh, which is probably what should have come first. But we have a couple of minutes, inshallah. And I'll end with this. But when it comes to fiqh, then it's the same process of starting with shorter texts or starting with the text that you are studying with your teacher. So in terms of building your library, if there's something lesser, then this is fine to kind of bring in. Like, for example, it might be the Maraq al-Sa'adat by Imam Shurun Balali. It might be the Ithaf al-Talib. It might be some other short text. But there's a difference between having the book on your shelf as a lesser text and actually reading it, because the Maraq al-Sa'adat might give you a different perspective and it might conflict with what you're being taught in the classroom. So this is why you have to be paying attention. And that's why I also mentioned that you have to consult with respect to what you should be reading and studying, and so on and so forth. And then you want to kind of build from the key primers, the likes of Quduri. It doesn't make sense for you to have some odd gloss on something or some random commentary on some secondary or tertiary work if you don't have the key work. So you begin at the primers, the likes of Quduri, the Mukhtar, the Kanz, the Wiqaya, even the Hidayah itself. And then, building upon that by not necessarily getting a sharh of everything, because you're not studying everything yet. But it might be that you're studying the ikhtiyar, or you're studying, the mukhtar. So necessarily you should have access to the ikhtiyar, but recognition of even the manhaj which is being adopted in the ikhtiyar is really important. You should know the sources of the text. That's, if you don't have these types of things, then again, you miss out on a lot of ilm. If you're not thinking about the masadir of authors, you learn about these types of things from what? The tabaqat. Not only the tabaqat, but also from the expansiveness of your reading and the teachers and what's happening on the page before you. This is why all of these things are interconnected, right? And then going across, it's going to take me a long time to express, all the commentaries and everything. So I'm not trying to do that. But you'd go through, you'd get a commentary. Get a commentary of another work, for example, and then actually access these types of things and think why you'd need like another commentary. Again, remember, if you've graduated, or you are later in your talab al-ilm, or entering or doing research or something, or there's something that's rare, these are all outside the qaida. Right? So these are all outside the qaida. This is a normal qaida with respect to how to benefit from what you have. So you don't want a contemporary book. Remember, you want the kind, there's nothing wrong with those types of things as such. They can be supplementary, but don't make them the asl. The asl are the kinds of books which made ulama, right? And which have been agreed upon as the authoritative books of the tradition. That's what you use as the umda. That these are the central works, and then other books and other things can be supplementary. Again, in conjunction with your teacher, you can come to conclusions about what the best course of action is for that, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. After that, of course, you transition to hawashi and the like, and also secondary works. There are many specific works like the Munyatul Sayyadin, for example, like the Ahkam al-Sawm, like the Ahkam al-Manasik, like the Halal wal-Haram, like the specific works on ifta, specific works on Jami' al-Fusulain, and the tasheeh and the tanqih of it in the Nur al-Ain. So, of course, everything I'm saying, these are all printed books, right? So these are all printed books I'm talking about. So, so the world is can be quite overwhelming. There's a lot there, but if you focus, then you'll find that the heart of all of these masail is in these ummahat. If you attain unto the ummahat, everything else is for takmeel, right? It's for completion. Yeah, ta'lim, you mean Zarnuji? Yes, that's correct. What would be a good area for takhassus once someone has a grounding? Which subject would you say is most needed for future tulab al-ilm, future generations? Well, I'm just going to say fiqh, because the world is evolving a lot, and the ulama have many statements about how we always need fuqaha. Fuqaha have made the world go round. They were the most important ulama of every empire, and you can just go do some reading and research, and you'll see how. Of course, not to say that we don't need people who know kalam and so on and so forth, everything else. Of course, all of these are furud al-kifayat. But in terms of the most significant people, then the faqih was extremely significant. So dedicate yourself to this, and inshallah, you will find a great deal of success. That whosoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wishes well for, He grants them a deep understanding of the religion. And that's why it's only a small number of people who know what they can expect in the akhirah, and the fuqaha are amongst them. Right? So, but that's if they are sincere. If they are sincere, if they have ikhlas, and if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts their efforts, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for tawfiq. I apologize if this session was not as what you were expecting or hoping for, but inshallah it's just some thoughts on building a library and talab al-ilm, and I prayed that it was beneficial. Of course, a lot of these specifics are really going to depend on individuals and what they are seeking, and what they are studying with their teachers and their mashayikh and the like. So it's difficult to say that, okay, you should buy this or buy that. So it's really about kind of engaging with what you have, and then consulting with people, ensuring that you end up with the best copy or the right copy, and not necessarily a bad copy of the work, even though if you're a good talib al-ilm, you can correct mistakes and the like, but it's worth saving your time and saving your money, and just buying good editions, and keeping abreast of new publications and the like is always going to be beneficial to you, so you can see what's coming out and where fawaid might manifest. And it's only you'll learn a lot about this type of stuff through reading the tabaqat literature, about what the ulama deemed to be important, the kinds of books that they were studying, the kinds of comments that they were making, who read what. Like Qari al-Hidayah, for example, apparently read with Akmaluddin al-Babarti the Hidayah 16 times. And he's Qari al-Hidayah. He was Qari al-Hidayah, right? And they say one of the reasons was because he read it 16 times with Akmaluddin al-Babarti. And he was the Shaykh of Ibn al-Humam. So imagine, again, it just shows you, look, I was talking earlier about reading a masala, reading a book a second time. And look at these ulama, imagine 16 times. like the Hidayah, and you go back to the beginning, and you read it again, then you go back to the beginning and read it again. Most people wouldn't have the capacity to read even like small books a second time. They find that difficult. Like it's difficult for the nafs, which is all the more reason for why you should do it. Right? There's and I'll end with the story. There was I think it was, I can't remember saying it's Sharif al-Jurjani, but it was somebody, and he read the book. He read the book and studied 100 times. And he wrote Hawashi on the book after reading it, studying it 100 times. Then he went to the author who was still alive and studied the book with him. Of course, this is after he's done his preliminary studies and the like, so he's able to access the text and understand what's happening and write all of his notes and questions and everything, and then go to the sheikh. So there's always levels of talab al-ilm. And then I pray that this was beneficial, and I apologize if it was longer than was expected. And please leave, I guess, comments and likes, and I guess do the stuff that you're supposed to do on these types of platforms, so others can benefit. And if you have any further questions or suggestions or recommendations, then I am all ears, and I'm here at your service. Bi'ithnillahi ta'ala. Jazakumullahu ta'ala khairan. Keep singing your du'as, and thank you everybody for coming. Sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.